Hi, this is Thierry Samlal from PMML. Today I will explain to you the evolution of the multifamily market for the month of November 2021 and for the province of Quebec. Okay, so let's start off with a few statistics. I always like to start off with the transactional volumes per region and for the greater region of Montreal in the province of Quebec, just to look at the evolution of the market and to see how it's performing over time. So if we're looking at the current market this month for the greater area of Montreal, including Montreal Island, North Shore, and South Shore of the island, we're about at $267 million in transactional volume. So we picked up 10% of transactional volume compared to the previous month. But what you must know is that if we're looking at the total year, we started off very, very strong in the market at about 310 million. That maintained. We went up and down over the months. We were at 365 million in the month of April, and then we went to 261 million in the month of May, back up to 310. And then we skyrocketed mid-year, meaning July, August, September, October. So we skyrocketed our volume. Why? Because we had a lot of transactional volume that was stuck in the pipeline. There was a lot of transactions of multiplexes that took place at the end of the fourth quarter of 2020 and the first quarter of 2021 that were stuck in the pipeline. Why? Because of financing that took a lot of time. And then because we had a lot of issues with all of the services that were related to a transaction, including the surveyors. We had certificate of locations that were late. We had environmental expertises that were late. We had financing that was late, and then all of that hit the notary's offices, and then the notaries got late because they had already transactional volume backups of the previous months. So it created a strong transactional volume for mid-year, including July, August, September, and October. So now, it's normal that we're coming back to a market normal now. So we're in a comfortable normal, things that we were seeing in 2020. So the multifamily market is still very strong in the greater area of Montreal. For the Montreal Island, we're at 183 million in volume, which is pretty much standard. We went a little bit higher than that. We went a little bit lower. We saw transactional volumes going up to 313 million. For the greater area of Montreal. Don't forget that certain transactions really increase the volume since they're very large in size and in scale. So they come and modify the market standards and when they take place. In this case, we're pretty much linear. Quebec City, national capital of Quebec, 41 million, which is it's more or less around average. Gatineau, 13 million. That's for multifamily product. Now, what you must not forget is for the Gatineau region, there's a lot of land densification taking place right now. Why? First of all, it's very close to Ottawa, and the prices in Ottawa for multifamily are very, very high, and for rents are extremely high also. So a lot of the workforce is coming over to Quebec now to live and go back to Ottawa for work. And that Ottawa and Quebec, they're just separated by a river. So on the one side of the river, you have Ottawa. On the other side, you have Hull. Then you have Gatineau, Elmer, etc., which are subregions. So there's a lot of land that's sold recently. And on those pieces of land, which are being highly densified right now, in certain places in Gatineau, you could go get zoning for 8 to 10 stories high right now. And they're developing a light train system there. Where they're going to create ecosystems which are oriented around transportation. So when you have public transportation and you have a system which is really developed with more high-speed routes, then you create ecosystems. And when you have densification and you're creating areas where you could build 8 to 10 story high buildings in in zones where the height of current buildings are 2 to 3 stories, naturally you're highly densifying. And that permits you to create space, commercial spaces around that high densification. It permits you to use your public transportation and create transit-oriented development. So that's exactly what's going on right now in Gatineau. And what you're seeing now is going to be highly increased in the next few years and months. And there's a lot of land being sold. So on top of the volume of existing multifamily buildings or recent buildings sold, you have that land which is going to be hyper-densified in the next few years. So definitely to be looked at. The Sherbrooke market, which is a university and learning city, is really linear. We're at $11 million in volumes of sales. We've seen that type of volume several times at Sherbrooke. Sherbrooke went up to 23 million, 31 million, 40 million, and even up to 89 million. Why? Because Sherbrooke, even if it's a very linear market, there's some major transactions taking place from time to time in Sherbrooke. And what happens in that case, it creates surge in volume. Now, when we were looking at the month of October, there was a major transaction that took place in October that brought up the transactional volume to 39 billion. And I'm also thinking of a major transaction that skyrocketed the Sherbrooke market to 89 million when a REIT purchased 2 concrete buildings right at the end of the Nations Lake. There's a lake in the middle of downtown Sherbrooke, beautiful place. And there's 2 buildings at the end of that lake, and those were sold for a high price in volume by a REIT. And when you have a REIT coming into a city, a secondary city like Sherbrooke, you're putting that city on the map, because what happens is if the REIT did its market search in the area, and if the investors in back of the REIT had confidence in the product, and vice versa, the REIT bringing that confidence to their clientele, to their business clientele, to their investors, well, then you have confidence in that market. And now what happens is that since a REIT did it once, other REITs are going to come in, and then major buyers which are looking to buy in Montreal and Quebec City are now starting to look at Sherbrooke for that purpose. So really interesting. Keep Sherbrooke in mind, keep Gatineau in mind. Quebec, a very good performance. Montreal is maintaining. So a very standard market right now. So we're coming back to standard transactional volumes in all of the markets because we had a crazy mid-year. And I'm going to be very excited to give you my December market report, because in December we'll have a look at the whole year. What we'll do is we'll take the transactional volumes and we'll spread them out a bit and see how the market's performed in total. And that's going to be very interesting, because then we're going to be able to look at the tendencies and try to get a gist of where the market is going in the next few months. So definitely something to look at. Those were my statistics for the month. Now let's go into my top 5 transactions. I always pick and choose with my analysts here some major transactions, and then I talk to you about them to give you an idea of where the market's going. So first of all, last month we did not talk about Quebec City. We gave some statistics, but I did not talk about any major transactions taking place in Quebec. But don't forget, this year there were several major transactions that took place in Quebec City. Quebec City is not that big of a territory, but has good price volume and also has very good rent. So interesting to look at. My top one is in Beauport. Beauport is a part of Quebec which is more to the east, very much in demand right now. We're seeing a lot of transactions take place in that area. 216 units, elevator, laundromat, interior, and exterior parking lots. So 2 very large buildings in like a V shape, purchased by a owner that already has several hundreds of apartment buildings of units in Quebec City. So this was a natural transaction for that purchaser, that instead of buying a lot of several smaller units, bought a big densified project, which there's not that much of in Quebec City, unless you're going towards the more recent build. But in the existing assets, there's not that much big buildings that you would see transacted in a year. So this 216 units went for close to $105,000 per door, which was a very lucrative deal for the buyer, and for that many units at one shot. Now also in this building, the purchaser, this definitely has an optimization figure here because there's two things. First of all, a lot of the services are included in the rental price. So the hot water, the electricity, and the heating are all included, which could either mean two things. Either there's going to be an upgrade in revenue and the purchaser is going to create, first of all, put a name on the building, create a personality around the building, put services around that building. It could be security services, it could be more amenities, internet, etc. And create a lifestyle around that building and just increase the price with all included, with an all inclusion of the rents and the services into one package where basically the tenant is only paying one bill. So that's one trend. The other trend here is to be able to take that building and definitely optimize the rents a bit, but also decrease the expenses by optimizing all of the heating, the electrics, putting them back to the charges of the tenants, renegotiating the rents, doing a little bit of renos. So two completely different models taking place here. And there's also an elevator in this building. I mean, that's definitely an interesting amenity for everybody that's getting up there in age and that want to have that elevator that you would usually find in a high-rise or a larger scale asset, but here that you find in a more comfortable family-like environment. So interesting. All of the services are close by. A lot of it can be done by short distance. So definitely an interesting asset for the tenants, but for the purchaser that added it to his existing portfolio. Top two. Let's go to downtown Montreal. For those who know downtown, let's go to the Concordia University, which is more on the center-western part of the city in the Golden Mile. This asset is in that area, and a lot of transactions are taking place with buyers of outside of the province of Quebec and international buyers in the Golden Mile. Why? Because it's south central Montreal and it's the western part of Montreal. So it's the west side, and that's very popular in North America. It's a known venue that in North America, when you're in a major city, if you're going on the west side, usually you go and get a better lifestyle. And this is the case right now for this asset. So high-rise, concrete building, 115 units, almost 20 floors. And this went for close to $246,000 per door, which is pretty interesting in pricing when you're considering the size of the unit. So these are all larger units with balconies in an area where all of the services are there, close to the universities, close to Mount Royal. Mount Royal is a mountain in the center of the city, right next to downtown. It's a huge green space with an artificial lake on top. So a lot of people like to live downtown, go to the mountain, go to that green space, come back down into the city to work, go back to school at the universities for schooling. A lot of the students work also in downtown Montreal in the commercial districts. And even if a lot of office spaces are closed in downtown Montreal right now, well, everything that has to do with commerce is still rolling. I mean, it's booming right here. And my offices are right next to that. I'm in downtown Montreal. My office is my PMML office, which I'm in right now, is in downtown Montreal. So I could definitely see that happening every day. A lot of construction going on the skyline. So this asset was very interesting for a second reason. The second reason is if you're a purchaser and you want to buy a high-rise right now, you're going to end up with, most likely, a high-rise with a footprint which is much smaller because land is going up in prices right now in downtown Montreal. So your footprint is going to be smaller. That footprint being smaller, you could still densify vertically, but you're going to have to put smaller units in there. So that's where the game is. So if you want rental value, you could pick up that rental value in the smaller units because the smaller units go for a higher price of rent per square foot when they have services included into them, and often when it's new. But if you want to go get people that are looking for leg room and living space, well, then you have to go to an existing asset. And this one was very interesting for that reason. So interior parking lot, elevator, there is a convenience store in the building, there's a gym, there's a laundromat, it's close to universities, it's a no-brainer, and at $245,000, almost $246,000 per door, it's definitely a great deal. And this was purchased by a major scale buyer and a major scale real estate owner in Montreal that has assets in all of the ranges, industrial to multifamily. So definitely an interesting deal. A very exciting deal. Then we'll go to the northern part of Centre Montreal, which is the Villeray district. Villeray district is mostly, the tenant base in that area is mostly smaller families, more of the artistic and professional type, and also a lot of students like to live in that area. So it's an area where you're going to find it's not necessarily very attractive as in architecture or in location, but it is in another way because there's easy access to Montreal. You're not in the downtown core, so if you don't want to live in the downtown core, it's a little bit more of a smaller neighborhood, very comfortable. A lot of restaurants, a lot of very modern and very up-to-date, trendy restaurants and bars, etc. So it's a nice place to live in if you want to have that lifestyle. Now this asset was sold between two major owners of about the same scale, one leaving the market, one maintaining and increasing his assets. And these people are linked in a certain way. And this asset went for an 87-door asset, went for about $121,000 per door, which is a little lower than market standards, definitely. And what's interesting here is everything is included in the rent. You have Wi-Fi, you have a cable TV, you have a heating, electricity, hot water. So that's a model that's very popular right now for clientele which would like to rotate. And the rents in that area are definitely higher. And the clientele definitely has the capacity not to pay the rents that you could find in downtown Montreal, but definitely higher than the market standards. So very interesting to see this asset being sold. There's a surveillance system in this building. There's a laundromat. There's a gym, a pool, a bicycle parking lot inside. So interesting to see that this asset went for that price. Now, let's come back to downtown Montreal, close to the mountain. Here we have an asset that was sold, which is pretty large in footprint, a 60-door, 5-story above ground, sold by a mid-size owner selling to a mid-size buyer. So those people are able to have the same type of discussions and to understand one another in their needs. And this transaction went for close to $310,000 per door. Now this asset has larger units, it has a larger footprint, it has larger units in size, it's close to the mountain, so naturally it goes for a higher pricing. It's not a high rise, which is maybe a little bit less accessible for your mid-sized buyer, but still it's a larger building and it makes it attractive for the mid-sized buyer, which is willing to pay maybe a little bit more per door to buy it. So this transaction went close to $310,000 per door, and that's the explanation for that. There's an interior parking lot, which is a definite must in that area, and it's very, very close to the McGill University, very close to the McGill Stadium, very close to the mountain. Definitely capable of getting high rents for this asset, so very interesting sale. And finally, let's go to Huntsic. Huntsic is close to downtown Montreal, in the northern part of the downtown core, if you like. This building was sold for, it's a 60 unit, and it sold for a very low price of almost $72,000 per door. Now, I haven't seen many assets sold for such a price. Also, we consider here that the heating is paid by the owner, so there's definitely maybe an upscale to reduce the operational expenses in the building, and therefore over time refinance and increase the revenue. So interesting asset. I'm pretty sure that the parties were not represented in this file because of the price of the transaction, and it's a really typical building, 60 units, 3 stories high above ground. Those are typical buildings for that area. You would see in Huntsic, you would see a few of those buildings. You would see a few of those buildings going towards Côte des Neiges, a similar area. And Huntsic is picking up pretty much in pricing right now. So really an interesting sale. Food for thought, as we say. So if we sum things up, this month is a very standard month for the in terms of transactional volume. We had months which were crazy in the last in the mid-year and at the beginning of the year due to COVID. We could see that all that's now tapering off. The COVID effect is now tapering off slowly, and now we're coming back to transactional volumes which are much more representative of the market. And also I'll be able to maybe next month give you more detail on how things went for the year. And the December report, I will be recapping the year, and we will be looking at how cap rates have traveled over the year, how the price per door was influenced, and what was the different pricing per different areas. We will look at also how the market performed after massive refinancing, what are the trends of the market. So stay tuned next month. It's going to be a really interesting market report. And from there on, have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. If ever you have questions, don't hesitate to call us. Come and see me. You could go on PMML.ca website, go on PMML.tv. We have a lot of content there. Our website from landdev.ai. We also have GoPlex, which is a division of smaller buildings now. So stay tuned, and I'll see you next time.